From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang Guan.
Hello and welcome to The Hub. I'm Wang Guan. This week in Tianjin, China hosted the largest ever summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO. And the deliverables from this year's summit are remarkable. First of all, at the Tianjin Summit, President Xi Jinping of China proposed the Global Governance Initiative, or GGI. This is the latest vision proposed by the Chinese leader on top of his global initiatives on development, security, and civilization. Now put together, they represent China's vision of a fair world order and China's solutions to making it a reality. It calls for equal and orderly multipolarization of global affairs and a more just and equitable global governance system with economic development at its core. It is also saying that the era of one or two countries calling all the shots should end and must end. Instead of great powers issuing ultimatums, China wants dialogue over division, cooperation over zero-sum games. Now, this year marks the 80th anniversary since Chinese people's war of resistance against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascist War, aka the World War II. The SCO leaders issued a statement to honor that occasion: never forget the lessons of World War II. Ultranationalism, racism, the notion that one race or culture is superior is born to lead. Those toxic ideas led humanity into catastrophe. Indeed, the SCO declaration condemned attempts to revive fascist ideologies or distort the history and legacy of that victory. It is a pointed rebuke. We see troubling signs today from some politicians in Europe whitewashing wartime collaborators to certain American factions flirting with supremacist rhetoric and ideas. The SCO stance is a reminder that historical revisionism and chauvinism are slippery slopes. I discussed this with Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, who attended this year's SCO in Tianjin.
And obviously, if you are an historian, a European historian, you tend to look into the World War II as centered in the European scenario. And so there is this idea that the World War started in 1939 and then in 1945. But the truth is that the beginning of the Second World War was triggered by Japan against China, the famous incident that is well known. And it's true that the resistance of China against Japan was for many years. It had a fundamental contribution to weaken Japan, and that allowed for Japan to be defeated in the end of Second World War. So the Chinese contribution is a contribution that was extremely important for the victory of the Allies, that include China.
Now, my second point, through the Tianjin Declaration, the SCO leaders reaffirmed commitment to the post-World War II international system with the United Nations at its core. Now, the UN system isn't perfect. Nation-states still compete and maneuver, wars still happen, but let's give due credit. In the 80 years since the UN-centered order, the world avoided another global war and achieved unprecedented human progress, many of which were enabled by the UN framework and initiatives. Yes, the system has flaws, but imagine a world without those institutions. And another key consensus at this year's SCO is to foster a development-first multilateralism. President Xi Jinping urged this group to take advantage of the mega-scale market to improve trade and investment facilitation. The summit approved an SCO Development Strategy 2026 through 2035, a 10-year roadmap for cooperation, and launched a new initiative to boost connectivity. The group is also building its own financial architecture. They agreed to establish an SCO Development Bank, a new multilateral lending institution to fund joint projects. By financing themselves, these countries reduce reliance on Western-dominated financial systems and, by extension, on the US dollar's dominance. It is one more sign of an emerging financial independence in the global South. Now, one more bureaucratic yet important change: the SCO streamlined its expansion process. They merged the old observer and dialogue partner roles into a single SCO partner status, making it easier for new countries to engage. Laos, for example, was granted partnership under this new system. The subtext is clear. The SCO is open for business to any nation who shares its cooperative spirit, and many are knocking at the door. Taken together, all these points paint a picture of the SCO as an emerging alternative paradigm in international relations. Unlike NATO or other Western-led alliances, the SCO does not demand its members or partners conform to a single ideology or swear allegiance to a hegemon. For example, India and Pakistan, with sometimes diverging geopolitical calculations, to put it mildly, are both members of the SCO. So are India and Russia, who hail from different political systems. You don't have to be a liberal democracy or a military ally to join. You have to respect the principles of the Shanghai Spirit: mutual trust, mutual benefit, equality, consultation, respect for diversity, and common development. It is a different organizing principle. One might even call it a new model of global cooperation. In short, the SCO leaders are telling the world that there is another way to run global affairs, one not defined by winners and losers, but by partners walking forward side by side. Now, joining us for more discussions on these topics from Tehran, Iran, we have Mohammad Marandi, professor at Tehran University, and from Yichun, Heilongjiang province of China, Yang Xiyu, senior fellow at the China Institute of International Studies. Welcome, gentlemen. Professor Marandi, let me go to you first. President Xi Jinping proposed this Global Governance Initiative, or GGI. This is the latest addition to the three global initiatives on development, security, and civilization that President Xi has proposed. How significant is this proposal, or will this proposal be going forward?
It's extremely important, and the Iranian president, as you know, has responded very favorably to this proposal. We are living in very uncertain times, and unfortunately, Western countries have been a source of instability for the rest of the world, especially in recent years. And international bodies that have been created and controlled by the West since the Second World War have failed to preserve global security and stability and to bring about peace for people across the globe. So this initiative is significant, especially since Asia is on the rise and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is focused on Asia, the security of Asia, integration, the economic integration of Asia. And therefore, at this moment, we know that there are many bad faith actors who would want to see insecurity and instability in order to prevent greater prosperity in this continent. So the initiative, I think, will be strongly supported, and I think it will have a major role to play, just as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization itself. Its role is being enhanced by the circumstances that we live in today. And I must say that this is, to a large degree, due to the behavior of Western countries. The fact that they've been sanctioning other countries, that they've been imposing unreasonable tariffs and carrying out trade wars against other countries, carrying out dirty wars and supporting terror organizations, that has been a huge incentive for countries across the global south and in Asia in particular to look to one another in order to protect their security, their sovereignty, and the well-being of their citizens.
Professor Yang, how big of a milestone do you think this global governance initiative proposed by President Xi will be, on top of all these three other initiatives? Is this China's vision of a new world order, or to make the current world order fairer and more equitable?
Yeah, actually, you mentioned a very important key word: international order. The now reality is the existing international order established in 1945 has been malfunctional in many ways. However, a new functional international order is far from established. Therefore, the previous initiatives you mentioned by President Xi Jinping set systematic goals from peace and security, from economic prosperity and development, from the people-to-people linked civilization, the three-dimension development for human being. And the fourth initiative actually is a very important and a key implementation for the previous three initiatives. So make the four initiatives as a systematic framework for improving and reshaping the existing international order towards more democratic, more just, and more rational direction. Therefore, I think the four initiatives get together as a base for all the peoples in the world for the better international order and for the more stable and predictable peace and securities and development.
Professor Yang, you talk about the correlation of these four initiatives, but exactly and specifically, how do you see this global governance initiative relating to the three previous initiatives, which largely focuses on specific areas of development, the economic growth, security, traditional or unconventional, and civilizations, cultures, talking to each other, learning from one another. How does this latest one relating to all other three?
Yeah, it's a very important question. Let me say it by this way: every country, every nation, every people hope to have a peace and security, hope to have a sustainable economic development, and hope to have a enjoyable culture civilization. However, in the current world, no country can materialize what they want in the security, peace, and economic development and civilization by themselves. In other words, individual people, individual nation cannot bring about what they want. Only through international cooperation under a democratic, just, and rational framework. Therefore, the fourth initiative set a base for the global governance, say international cooperative global governance for all countries to bring about what they want. Therefore, the fourth initiative is not only part of the framework I mentioned, composed by the four initiatives, but also lay a solid base for all nations, all peoples, no matter its differences of political, economic, and culture, history, religions, have a common shared base towards shared future.
Of course, this GGI is the Global Governance Initiatives is set against the backdrop of the SCO. And this year's SCO is attended by a record number of heads of state and heads of government, 26 of them from the Eurasian continent and beyond. Professor Marandi, there has been this Tianjin Declaration as a concrete a policy statement of this Tianjin Summit, as well as a declaration on the legacy of the World War II, the decision to set up this SCO bank, so on and so forth. What do you see as the important deliverables from this year's SCO Tianjin Summit?
Actually, I think that this summit is probably the most important summit that the SCO has had so far. And hosting it in Tianjin, I think, has particular significance because it is a harbor, a port that is key to trade, which is key to security across Asia. Asian security is necessary in order for trade to grow and in order for us to have peace and prosperity. But in addition to that, what is very significant is what is going on around us. We see increasingly the world moving towards instability. The United States is becoming less predictable. It is lashing out at different countries across different continents. It has antagonized, as we all know, India recently. It's antagonized the Brazilians recently. And this sense of an absence of security and stability is growing. And international bodies that have been controlled by the West, such as the UN, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and others, are being misused. So under these circumstances, I think the leaders of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization believe that this body, along with BRICS, for example, and other such bodies, they have to play a bigger role in preserving peace and security. We can no longer rely on those traditional forms that your other guests rightly pointed out. They're dysfunctional. So some of the measures that we're seeing that are being taken now in accordance with the declaration are meaningful. They have more substance than what we saw on previous occasions. So this body, this organization, is becoming an organization that will have a more direct influence on coordination and cooperation between member states in future. And I think that's something that is very necessary during these uncertain times.
Professor Marandi, let me ask you this, because many Western scholars and strategists are asking this question. Is SCO the Eastern NATO?
No, I think that Western countries have an obsession and with the rising Asia and with the rising global South, or they project their own actions upon others. They're the ones who have NATO and who use NATO as a tool against countries that are not even in Europe or North America. They have created an exclusive military club. They assume that everyone else is behaving like themselves. Actually, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is a democratic body. Unlike what we see in the West, where recently we saw Western leaders go to the White House like school students in front of Trump, here it is democratic. They sit around the table. They treat one another as equals. It is not directed at anyone else, including the West. It is to create greater cooperation, greater security, greater prosperity for Asia. Asia is growing rapidly. So it is only natural that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization emerges, and BRICS as well. When countries, their banking sector is sanctioned, that disrupts life in the Global South. The Global South needs a solution. When dirty wars are being carried out against the Global South needs greater security, and they work closer together. And when unreasonable tariffs are imposed as a means to hold countries back, when these are imposed by Western countries, the Global South has to find a solution for the prosperity of their own people, and that creates greater convergence. So it is the actions of the West that has created the rise and the emergence and rise of the SCO and BRICS. But it's not directed against them. It's to protect the prosperity that is growing among people across Asia in the case of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
Yeah, thanks so much for all these perspectives. Professor Yang, how would you respond to questions asking whether SCO is, the NATO of the East, led by China or Russia?
The NATO, from its founding date to now, they always keep the mindset, say we must maintain a common or shared enemy. That is the base to maintain the bloc, maintain the organization functional. Let's look at the SCO. No people, even from some of Western politicians, they cannot say SCO has a very clear enemy or the so-called shared targets. They only have the shared goal, say cooperation on equal footing. That is why the SCO can expand. SCO have opened a new way, say peace through cooperation, prosperity through cooperation, and civilization through cooperation. No one can link the NATO format with the SCO format simply because from all dimensions, totally differences between the two.
Yeah, we see a whole range of deliverables from this year's SCO joint statement. a multilateral statement issued by the members as well as the participating countries. The decision to set up a new SCO bank, funding committed to fund more connectivity projects, infrastructure projects, projects that concern everyday people. What do you think are the most important outcomes out of all these? Professor Yang.
The most important development for SCO's organization summit lies in the more solid consensus for more practical cooperations in multilateral areas. Especially, I take special notice for the new areas of cooperation in economic area, because all members of SCO now are desperately to develop their economy in the current more unstable situation of the globe. For example, China initiated 3 new areas of cooperation in the green industry, in the energy, and AI. So the 3 areas of cooperation actually not only open a new areas for cooperation, but also lay a path for the new type of development, not only for the member of the SCO, but also for the global economic future.
Right. Another very important occasion we're marking is the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, the victory of peace, here in China known as the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression. Of course, that is around the world, the World Anti-Fascist War. Professor Marandi, you studied history extensively. We all know this Eurocentric view on World War II, or the American-centric view, right, on World War II, which is about Pearl Harbor, Dunkirk, Normandy landing. Whereas in the Far East, 35 million lives or more are lost. $900 billion of losses and damages. How do you, understand the SCO statement on World War II and really moving away from a Euro-American centric view?
Well, it's very interesting, the point you make, and the issue of Orientalism. You're absolutely right. And historically, we know that China has been ignored, and the role that Japan played in the slaughter across China has been ignored, basically because Japan has been in the American camp during this period. Just like in Europe, the role that the Russians played against the German regime at that time has always been put aside, and the priority has been the role of Western powers, despite the fact that their role was not all that significant. And this, I think, is clear. It has to do with racism and hierarchy, global hierarchy. Chinese lives obviously don't matter to those people who build these narratives. But the SCO is a symbol of how the world is changing. The very fact that this military parade is going to be attended by so many global leaders shows that the significance of what happened to China in the Second World War today is being increasingly recognized. And that means that this Eurocentric world is dissolving. And just as multilateralism is on the rise, the rise of alternative narratives are on the rise as well. And I think this is very welcome. The Chinese suffered enormously in the Second World War, and it is completely unacceptable for the West to diminish that. And I think that the SCO, which is a rising organization, one of its achievements is to put the reality of the Second World War under the spotlight.
Thank you so much for really empathizing with the sacrifices made in the Eastern Theater, Professor Marandi. Much appreciated. Professor Yang, what do you think is a fitting and proper historical view on the history of World War II and its legacy?
Well, I think in terms of legacy, all people need to recognize that the basic reason and the basic foundation for the victory of the World War II stem from the grand cooperation through the East to the West. No matter the differences from political regime or ideological differences, all nations hand in hand to have a close cooperation. That is the basic fundamental reason to defeat the fascists globally. So that is the legacy we need to extend, we need to take for the future. And for the lesson, I think the breakout of the World War II stemmed from the broken international order, broken basic international law, rule of laws. So now uncertainties and the geopolitical conflicts are increasing. Under the current dangerous situation, we need to draw a lesson from the history, say, firmly insisting on the rule of law in international politics and economics, and enhancing the international close cooperation to maintain the peace and stability, insisting on the multilateralism rather than unilateralism. If we throw away the big lessons, then we may repeat the sad history. So now we at historical crossroad. We need continue our legacy, draw lessons from history that will lead us to a better future, or we will repeat the sad history.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Hub on CGTN. Our news coverage will continue. Bye and take care.